this election did nothing to lessen the polarization. We're about an equally divided country.
Welcome back to another installment of Barney and Clyde, brought to you fortnightly and forthrightly. This is BNC Season 2, Episode 21. Today we're going to talk about the recent election. Funny business or not? Is voter fraud an issue this week after the election? We're talking about the libertarian element. Did Dr. Joe Jorgensen make a difference in the election outcome, as is claimed by some? You'll never be woke enough. The left will not accept last week's vanquishing. Barney Quick, welcome back to the Digital Libation Station.
And welcome back to you. Yes, indeed. Clyde, always good to see you. Welcome to all those who are returning. We've got a reader or a viewership and listenership that has been growing, and we've got some faithful followers and so forth. But if you're new, the basic premise, in non-pandemic times, we meet at the libation station, the bar across from the office in my home, and we take 3 or 4 matters that are on the nation's plate at the time and kick them around. Clyde is a libertarian. I'm a conservative. There's a considerable amount of Venn diagram overlap, but there's certain areas that are outside that Venn diagram, and we have in common, the main thing we have in common is the notion of the primacy of human freedom, that it's the most important characteristic for human flourishing. So that's the premise. And we have these little segment names that we give things. And that's the premise. But we still have a beverage together, even though it's remotely, since this pandemic's hit. And Clyde, what do you got today?
I've got an O'Doul's Amber. So this is a non-alcoholic beer. Tries to be a step above the normal class of non-alcoholic beers. It still sucks, but it is a little bit better than most of the sort of like Budweiser-y. If you could make a Budweiser worse, you do it by taking the alcohol out of it. And they try to put a little bit of the flavor back in by having, I don't know, some more amber type grains, some more robust malts, and it definitely improves it, but it's still got miles to go.
Well, I'm going. I've got that autumnal theme going on. I've got some River Ridge salted caramel apple cider.
Ooh, it's very seasonal.
Well, we've got 3 things we're going to look at today that are of a pretty darn timely nature, I think. First off, the thing that is just going on and on and on is this notion that there's something fraudulent about the electoral process, generally speaking, and in particular places. Clyde, when we were doing a little show prep, he said that this may take us outside the Venn diagram. Easy for me to say, but my feeling, I mean, you look at the New York Times just this morning had a big piece. The Times officials the New York Times called officials in every state, and no evidence of voter fraud. I mean,
oh, that's horseshit. No evidence of voter fraud. Like, I mean, there's some evidence of voter fraud in every election, right? I mean, are they saying no evidence of widespread voter fraud or no evidence of substantial?
If you read into the article, I mean, they've only got so much space for a headline, but enough fraud that it would have moved the needle, that it would have made a difference in the outcome, is basically what they're saying. Election officials in dozens of states representing both political parties said there was no evidence that fraud or other irregularities played a role in the outcome, amounting to a forceful rebuke of President Trump's portrait of a fraudulent election.
What's that based on? They call these election officials in the state, and they go, well, I don't know, we did everything right. Of course we did everything right. You know, yeah, we're hitting 100%, man. The boss calls you, hey, how's everything going down there on the line? You guys knocking out your work? Oh yeah, boss, we're really doing it right. We did everything. Well, what about some quality problems? You guys have any quality problems? Oh no, boss, everything's great. You know.
Well, help me out here. What
Okay, well, my only point is that it's impossible for you and I to know what voter fraud occurred or didn't occur, or to really examine this in depth, right? Barney Quick and Clyde Myers can't know the specifics of the entire United States presidential election, brought to you by 50 states and God who knows how many counties within each of those states. Indiana has 92 counties, each with their own, election process. So you could imagine times that by 50 states, and some of them much more massive than Indiana. So we can't know what happened. But one thing I'll guarantee you there, how many votes were cast? Like 150 million, like half the population voted? Something like that. 150 million votes cast. And it was one of the most highest voter turnouts ever.
I think it set a record.
Yeah, and it was higher on both sides. So more people came out to vote Republican, and more people came out to vote Democrat. So we got more people voting. So there's got to be some fraud in that situation. There's got to be some incompetence in that situation. There's got to be some just mistakes, snafus, and computer problems in all that situation. The question isn't was there fraud, was there incompetence, was there abuse, was there what were there glitches? The question is how bad was that? Was it substantial? Did it would it throw the election in either way?
Yeah.
Even if it only threw one state. I mean, we got to sort that out. So just as a couple anecdotal examples, and again, this is from the New York Times, okay? I think we can agree that the Times is kind of a lefty outfit these days. So they said that 3 types of absentee ballots that never reached voters were discovered in a postal center outside Milwaukee. At least 9,000 absentee ballots requested by voters were never sent, and others recorded as sent were never received. Even when voters did return their completed ballots in the mail, thousands were postmarked too late to count, or not at all. So, I mean, there's an example. From the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, nearly 2,700 absentee ballots in Milwaukee were not sent, and about 1,600 in the Fox Valley were not processed because of computer glitches and mailing problems, according to the most comprehensive account of what went wrong in the April 7th election. So this was during the primary. But it just shows you that there are plenty of examples of this stuff, being broken. Let's see, in Pennsylvania, the Attorney General said before the election, if all votes are added up in Pennsylvania, Trump is going to lose. So he said that, or she said that before the election. And then, according to Rudy Giuliani, the former presidential candidate, the former mayor of New York City, and the President Trump's current attorney, he said the margin in Pennsylvania was about 40,000 votes, and they have at least 400 to 450,000 that they have in question at the moment, just in Pennsylvania. But they also have those in Michigan and Nevada and other places.
Well, this New York Times article that I got, the Office of the State's top law enforcement official said that there was no evidence to support Mr. Giuliani's claims that the election in the state was fair and secure. Many of the claims against the Commonwealth have already been dismissed, and repeating the false attacks is reckless, said Jacqueline Rhodes, a spokeswoman for Josh Shapiro, a Democrat who is Pennsylvania's Attorney General. No active lawsuit even alleges, and no evidence presented so far has shown widespread problems. I mean, it would be statistically unlikely that a national election would not have some funny business. there always it has been. The question is, and now we get to stuff like Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell's statement the other day that President Trump is certainly within his rights to pursue all means of investigation, but the general consensus is that no amount of possible change in tally numbers in any state is going to put him ahead of Joe Biden.
But what's the basis for that consensus? Like, I mean, what does that come from? Some kind of second tally or anything like that? Because I've got a couple Giuliani clips, if you're game for those. Let's listen to a couple of these here.
We had no observer, not a single observer, for over 350,000 mail-in votes that were counted.
Now, can you explain for people who don't know this, because Mayor Giuliani, you've been in government a long time, and you've been a prosecutor, so you are, despite what the left may want to say, you're a brilliant man. A lot of Americans may not know what that means. Can you qualify what observer means?
What it means is, and it makes sense, right? When you have a mail-in vote, absentee votes are always counted this way. In order to verify the vote, there's a Republican on one side, a Democrat on the other side, and an election official on the other. He takes out the envelope. Everybody gets the chance to look at it. They make sure it's a real envelope. They open that up. They put it aside. Then there's an inner envelope. They make sure that that is properly processed to a specific election district. They look inside. They see a ballot. They don't look at who he votes for. And then they both approve it, and they put it in the voting pot. Either side can make an objection.
Right.
The Republican or the Democrat. And then they put those aside, and then those are examined by an independent judge. That did not happen here. The law required that it happen.
Wow.
The law required that every single ballot be observed, because these mail-in ballots are inherently prone to fraud. They're easy to send in 100 of them,
right?
200 of them,
right?
So this is a very important part of the process that removes the fraud.
Right.
In the case of 400 or so ballots, there was no Republican inspector. We have 50 different witnesses to establish that and videotape.
Right. Yeah, and we just ran some of that videotape.
And we went to court, and the court required that we be allowed 6 feet closer so we could see the ballots. Mm-hmm. When Corey Lewandowski and his colleagues went back with the court order, that we were put 6 feet closer, but the people counting the ballots were moved 10 feet further away.
Oh,
and
right.
he was threatened with arrest by the sheriff if he insisted on anything else. The lawsuit we file tomorrow will allege what I just told you, and we will have a hearing and we will prove it. But by the time we're finished, that number is going to go way up.
Okay, so that's from the Louder with Crowder podcast. It's sort of a conservative comedy show, which is really welcome in conservative talk radio. A little something lighthearted is quite a breath of fresh air. But anyway, so Giuliani's claim is that they've got 50 witnesses in some areas that have signed affidavits, swearing that they saw election fraud take place, that they saw poll workers violate the law and exclude Republicans and that kind of thing. So it's again, it might not be that many, but it's there's a lot of witnesses saying that it did happen. So I think that they should probably take the time to investigate it. Let me play one more Giuliani if you got the time.
Sure.
If you have to go with your gut feeling, how much of this do you think, Mayor Giuliani, is just machines that don't work, systems that don't work, versus there potentially being actual nefarious activity? Because I think a lot of Americans are curious.
Well, I think the whole mail-in system from the very beginning was designed to give Democrats their fail-safe. That's why I think Hillary said, don't concede no matter what the vote is. keep going. Look, you look at Pennsylvania the night of the election. He was ahead by 800,000 votes.
Yeah, it was crazy.
64% of the vote. It's almost mathematically impossible to make that up, and we'll have experts that say that. So you got to cheat in order to make that up.
Right.
So I think that the mail-in vote was always kind of a way the Democrats could cloud what they do in almost every election, which is they hold back a couple of key cities.
Right.
To try to see how much they have to make up. Now, if they have to make up too much, they usually give up. But if they're within 1 or 2%, they're going to try to steal the election. In this case, it was too important.
Right.
So they went for a big one. The reason the situation in Pennsylvania is so obvious is they had to make up 800,000 votes.
Right.
I mean, they even expanded the denominator. At one point, there were 94% of the votes cast.
Right.
They counted 40,000 more votes, and it went down to 90%.
Yeah.
I mean, that's impossible.
Wow. Now, how does that happen?
That means you brought more. That means you ship more votes in the back door.
So he's saying that they had to suddenly come up with 800 some thousand votes all of a sudden just to bring the gap back up. So,
well, it would be his word against Josh Shapiro's, the Pennsylvania Attorney General. His office is saying that no active lawsuit even alleges widespread problems. And the point being that heads of state, from Netanyahu, Israel's Netanyahu, to Turkey's Erdogan, to Boris Johnson, who is really more of a kindred spirit to Trump than he is Biden. Boris Johnson of the UK, Angela Merkel, Macron of France, Trudeau. Our congratulations to Biden are pouring in from these people. And there are even some Republican senators, Ben Sasse comes to mind, who are breaking ranks and congratulating Biden. There just doesn't seem to be none of these, like I said, this New York Times article, in every state, election officials have said there's nothing so widespread that it would have changed the outcome.
yeah, but did they audit it? That's what I don't understand. So again, because you and I can't know this, I have to speculate.
Yeah.
I speculate that Joe Biden has won this thing fair and square. But I also speculate that there's a lot of cheating going on. And I don't know if that cheating is commanded from the top or if it's just people cheat for their team. And I don't know if that cheating is one-sided. I think if they did an audit, they might find that not only did the Democrats cheat, but the Republicans probably cheated in a lot of cases too. And I think that they'll find that our fragmented voting system is probably responsible for a lot of incompetence or a lot of people not getting to vote or votes counted improperly just by mistakes, glitches, and that kind of stuff. I think that anyone who doesn't want there to be an audit of this system, there's got to be...
Who conducts this audit? Our Federal Electoral Commission?
Well, I'm not sure, but what you have to have is you have to have agreed upon representatives from the Republican Party, from the Democrat Party, and then some kind of objective third party that they both agree on as an objective third party. And then you have to audit each state's process and go down as granularly as both sides agree to go down. It's suspicious to me that I haven't heard anyone on the left saying, yeah, we should conduct this audit, we should be 100% transparent with the American people, and we should make sure that everyone knows just how legitimately Joe Biden won. Let's do this thing. They're all calling for, to sweep it under the rug and move on with life and forget about it and not do this. Even if we think the process is good, you're still supposed to audit those processes, periodically, unless you want it to become bad. That's how every grown-up job operates. You audit your processes. You make sure that they're getting dialed in when they're getting out of sync. And I don't hear anyone on the left calling for the audit, or at least just being open to it. Everyone who seems to want transparency is on the right, it seems, and that makes sense that most of them would be, because they're the losers in this one so far, in this race so far. But you would think there'd be some people with both opinions on both sides. We've seen people on the right saying, "Nah, it's over. Let's move on. Congratulations, Mr. Biden." But I don't hear anybody in left media or government saying, "Yeah, let's conduct an audit of our election system."
Okay. There, I can see the case for an audit of the system. I just think that there is a worldwide consensus shaping up that this was cleanly enough, our national election was cleanly enough conducted that we can safely say that Donald Trump lost. And
But that's not how we conduct. That's not how we come to decisions, though. Like, there's a wide consensus on the man-made effects of global climate change, and how the temperature is warming and setting record hot years year after year. And I think that you would agree that well, just because people agree doesn't make it fact. It's this.
Right.
It's the science conducted behind it. How did that consensus become reached?
Well, there's not a uniform consensus on the matter of the climate. There's lots of
Well, it depends on who you ask. If you ask heads of state and people who aren't climate scientists, there's clearly a consensus.
okay.
So if you're asking people, in those same roles who aren't on the ground floor, how do they know what's going on? Especially if they don't audit the system.
This zeal on the part of Trump's enthusiasts and certainly his cult followers to claim fraud when no court is taking one of these cases up and pursuing it. As a conservative and someone who would like to think of himself as a Republican, but really doesn't anymore because of the Trump phenomenon, but it bothers me. And you've even got, for instance, in Georgia, the business about Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue. They, from my standpoint, like I say, as a conservative, they are the last possible bulwark that this country has against the imposition of the hard left vision of today's Democrats, the Biden-Harris administration, and the even farther left folks that we're going to be talking about later on the show. And they're acting like knuckleheads about it. This business is calling for the resignation of the Republican Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, saying that he failed to deliver honest and transparent elections. Knock it off. No one but them is disputing what's going on in Georgia, and they are endangering their own prospects in the January runoffs for both of their seats. And it's time to knock that off and focus on campaigning on the basis of your principles and ideas and policy proposals, and leave this out of it. And Donald Trump himself, with the "I won the election" tweets, he looks increasingly, with every day that goes on in public perception, like a guy out of touch with reality. Okay, I mean, my question, I guess, to you would be, should we hold off on officially declaring Biden the president-elect, and hold off on him getting briefings from our intelligence agencies and getting, being facilitated in the transition, period and so forth, until this audit? you'd like to see us perform?
Well, no, I don't think that they should hold off on. I don't think they should hold off on intelligence briefings. In fact, I think they're already doing that. I think they do that a month or so before the election. The contenders start getting some amount of national security and briefings on, things that if they need to go in on day one and take care of something, that they're up to speed already. So I believe that already happened. I remember following the Gary Johnson campaign in 2016, and they were talking about that, how the Republican and Democrat candidates were already getting intelligence briefings before the election, and they were trying to get that extended to the Libertarian ticket as well. But I think that there's certainly no rush to declare the winner. I mean, we've got until January. So I think you could at least take the rest of the month. How long was it in 2000 when
about mid-December, after that final Supreme Court decision?
Yeah.
At, I believe it was Broward County, Quit County.
Some 38 days or something like that. Yeah. So well over a month. So, I don't think there's any rush. I'm not sure you could complete a full audit in that time, but I think you could investigate the claims that have been submitted by the Trump campaign and Rudy Giuliani and see if there's anything there. There's probably something there. It may be small, but there's probably something there. But it's probably not enough to throw the election. But I don't think that we should let eyewitness cases of fraud and abuse and crimes go uninvestigated.
Okay. This year has just been highly unusual because of the pandemic, and that's why there was such an emphasis on mail-in voting. Under normal circumstances, I don't have much use for mail-in voting. As a matter of fact, I'm something of a traditionalist. I think unless you're overseas serving the country, or physically incapacitated, you ought to show up at the polls on election day.
Mm-hmm.
My point is that, as you were saying a while ago, there don't seem to be any on the left saying, let's have a thorough audit of our entire election process. Increasingly, there is no one but people who are on record as being diehard Trump supporters calling for prolonging this when there's an overriding consensus that the numbers are such that no new discoveries of discrepancies could reverse them. I just noticed while we were had a little a news item I noticed on a site I've got up, said that Pastor Robert Jeffress of the big Baptist megachurch in Dallas, and you couldn't ask for a more sycophantic, leg-humping Trump supporter, but he has said that it's a bitter pill to swallow, but Joe Biden is our president-elect. You get to a point where the country, indeed the world, and it is important to talk about it on a world scale because America's relations with other countries and its role in the world and global stability comes into play. It's the general perception is quickly becoming that Joe Biden is going to take the oath of office on January 20th, and there's just
and if they don't investigate the claims and they don't audit the system to some degree, and Republicans aren't allowed to be a part of that audit process, you'll never convince the base that it wasn't stolen from them. Never.
Yeah, that's true. It's going to leave a bad taste in their mouth, but they will, and do nothing to bring us together or end our polarization.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. I just okay.
Some people have even alluded third-party candidates as election spoilers.
Yeah. Okay. We're kind of segueing. All
We
right.
got to get
Yeah,
smoother with segues.
yeah. Okay. Well, and I you're speaking of Jorgensen, and tell me about how what was her final vote tally? What percentage of the vote did she get?
Just over 1%, I think.
Okay.
Of course, she carried no states, and it was I'm not really sure the exact numbers, but it was fewer than we got in 2016 with the Johnson-Weld campaign.
Okay.
But in a few states, Jorgensen covered the spread between Biden and Trump.
Okay.
So that's where they're saying where the states where Biden carried the state and the gap between them, Jorgensen's vote total covers the gap between those two. So they're saying a lot of news outlets are asking the question, well, did Jorgensen spoil the vote? And I don't know what do you call an election spoiler?
The only one that I really think has been in the last 30 years is Ross Perot in '92.
Yeah.
I think that he was a major factor in the election going to Bill Clinton.
A factor, but was he did he spoil it? Did he spoil it for who was Clinton running against then? Bush Sr.
W. Bush, yeah.
Yeah. So did he spoil the election for H.W. Bush, or did he?
I think research, combing over the numbers, has shown that he did. That it would have, or at any rate, it would have been a much tighter race without him in it.
Yeah, but does that really mean that Perot spoiled it for Bush, or did Bush spoil it by not appealing to the people who defected to go vote for Perot?
Well, okay, now that's worth.
So the same thing here with Dr. Jorgensen. I might point out that I believe she was the only candidate with a advanced degree, but I feel like a vote has to be earned by the candidate. It's not entitled. It's not entitled to them. So if Trump is not getting the votes, it's because he didn't earn them. I mean, assuming fraud and incompetence and all that aside, it's because he didn't appeal to those people, and they made a different choice. But it also assumes that that Jorgensen only pulled from Republicans. That Republicans are the only ones who are disenfranchised, and that is so not the case. I mean, if you look at Jorgensen's presence on social media sites, you'll see tons of young people, a lot of women, a lot of young women, and they're obviously pulling from the left quite hard. So I just think if you assume that she covered the spread, you have to assume that she was going to, or that one candidate or the other was going to get 100% of those votes.
Yeah.
In order to say that she spoiled it or whatever.
I would say, yeah, that's true. What's the conversation like been within the Libertarian Party and the Libertarian movement in the aftermath of last week's election? Has it given them any indicators as to what to do next time, or ineffective messaging or effective messaging or anything like that?
Well, I'm not really involved with party leadership, but I've got my finger on the pulse of it a little bit, just from what I try to coordinate our unofficial county chapter here in Bartholomew County, Indiana, and I'm a member of the LP Mises Caucus. And one theme that's been going through the party is which group of disenfranchised voters is most likely to come over? Who should we be reaching out to the most? Where should we angle our messaging? And so people like the Mises Caucus are saying, well, we should go straight towards the core libertarian principles and never back down from them, and be absolutely clear and not be hyper pragmatist and hyper willing to compromise. We should be true to our core beliefs. The party leadership historically has been sort of left leaning, so they're reaching out to the left a lot, and I think some of that comes from the LP being very welcoming to people with alternative lifestyles. The same-sex marriage equality was in the very first libertarian platform and has been in every one of them. So it's always been a good place for people who believed in human freedom, but also fiscal responsibility and that kind of stuff. So we recently in Indiana had the Donald Rainwater campaign, right?
Yeah.
And Donald Rainwater appealed to the right quite a bit.
One of my day jobs, I'm a journalist. There's a media company in the city where we live that owns 4 radio stations and has a website called Local News Digital. And I spent election night down at the station posting returns on Local News Digital, and I noticed that 2 of the counties in the listening area for the radio stations, Rainwater did substantially better than Woody Myers, the Democrat candidate.
So what he did was he appealed to the right. I think the party leadership suspects that the right comes to us anyway. People who are Republicans who get disenfranchised with the Republican Party come to us kind of naturally and organically because we're for free market economics, we're for personal liberties, we're for the Second Amendment, that kind of stuff. And so it seems like a natural home for a disenfranchised Republican. And a lot of people who, just believe in marriage equality and believe in those kinds of personal freedoms or drug decriminalization, they get tired of the Republican Party moving too slow on those things, and they come to the LP. So I think the party leadership thinks that they have to keep reaching out to the left and reaching out to the left. And while I think they should reach out to everybody, the Donald Rainwater campaign, which came in at 12% of the vote, I mean, that's just a huge record for a libertarian. It's just amazing.
It is. It's quite impressive.
But they did that by trying to outright the right, not trying to out woke the left. So they were trying to let me rephrase that. They were trying to out freedom the right instead of trying to out woke the left. And if you look at Jorgensen's Twitter feed and that kind of stuff, it was just this constant pandering to the left. It was tons of empty platitudes about racism and binary choice and all this kind of stuff. And it's just like, we're all anti-racist, okay? But if you're gonna bring that stuff up, you've got to have more than platitudes. You've got to have policy. You've got to have tangibles, and you've got to relate that to human freedom and how that works with the libertarian message. And it seemed like it fell flat. So I would venture to guess that the Jorgensen campaign did not pull from the right as heavily as a libertarian candidate normally would have. But that's complete speculation on my part.
Okay. Be interesting to know how libertarian gubernatorial candidates did against the Republicans and Democrats in other states.
Yeah.
Is Indiana's 12% figure higher or lower than some kind of average for that?
Oh, it's higher by a lot. I
Okay.
think the average race like that comes in around 2 to 5%.
Okay.
And the only times people will bring up, different candidates like Jesse Ventura and things like that, but Jesse Ventura as I understand, he's sort of libertarian leaning, sort of small L libertarian, but not on everything. And I think he ran as an independent, not as a libertarian. So that's a big difference. Once you put that L beside your name, I don't know what happens, but there's some stigma attached to it, I think.
Carries some kind of charge for a lot of people.
I think it's the biggest part is it not being an R or a D. And then maybe an I is more relatable than the L. I don't know. I'd love to know. I'd love to see Rainwater and Jorgensen both run again in 2024 as independents. Not because I want them to leave the LP, but just because I want to see what happens. I just want to see if they did nothing different.
Yeah.
That's the only change they make. What's the difference in the outcome?
Yeah.
So let me say one more thing about. Let me just wrap up with Jorgensen real quick.
Sure.
So she said this. This is a quote from her in the Guardian, when basically asked about this stuff, like there's candidates are mad at you and voters are mad at you. She reportedly said that many of her supporters were recovering Democrats who want U.S. troops brought home from abroad, as well as Republicans tired with federal spending. She says, if I can get Republicans to start acting like Republicans and cutting the deficit, and if I can get the Democrats to go back to being the party of peace, bringing our troops home and giving the average individual their rights, then yes, I would be very pleased, she told the newspaper. So this is a theme I've heard often within libertarian circles. Well, there's lots of ways to win an election, right? One of the ways is to win the election. If you're running for city council or whatever, you actually get appointed to the city, or you win your election and you serve on the city council. But another way to win is to drive membership for the LP, to stir up buzz and all that kind of stuff. Another way to win is to make the Republicans and Democrats better on liberty issues. If the Republicans aren't defending personal liberties, like Eric Holcomb, our Indiana governor, was bypassing our process and issuing stay-at-home orders and mask mandates and not upholding the issues of personal freedom, that lost him a lot of votes. And I think they got a little scared. So hopefully the next time they're going to think about that. They're going to think, well, if I step too far into the authoritarian boots, the libertarians are going to get pissed off again, and take a substantial chunk of the votes away.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if the Democrats improve too, because we stole some of their votes, then good. Let's just make society better.
Well, now, and something I want to touch on something you mentioned earlier in this segment, where you talked about how there's a swath within the Libertarian Party who says, let's not be pragmatists and try to be a big tent like the Republicans and the Democrats are. Well, let's stick to our principles unwaveringly. And I've often said it's one thing I greatly admire about you guys. I'd sure love to see Republicans be stick to three-pillared conservatism. But the Democrats also still have to aspire to be a big tent, and that's led to a real pickle for them this time around. Mm-hmm. The elections have shown, that, particularly for Congress and for on state levels, that the real hard left, represented by AOC types and Bernie Sanders types, the public did not cotton to that. They had a distaste for that. It was more pragmatic Democrats, Joe Manchin types, who did the best in our elections last week. And this does not please the likes of AOC at all. She called the Democrats incompetent after election losses. She said they could have placed progressives in top positions. For instance, in a tweet, you can't just tell the black, brown, and youth organizers writing in to save us every election to be quiet or not have their reps champion them when they need us, or wonder why they don't show up for midterms when they're scolded for existing. she is really livid that the party apparatus did not do more to shore up support for progressive candidates. As a matter of fact, she at one point said, I'm not sure I even understand why I'm in politics. She was so discouraged about it.
Yeah, I wish I had gotten the quote, but someone had asked her about running for the Senate seat, which I believe would be Schumer's Senate seat. And she said something to the effect of, I don't really know whether I'll be out living on a homestead or if I'll be doing that. Like, I have just as much chance of running for, Senate as running for the hills.
Okay. And yeah, okay. There was a conference call among a bunch of more moderate Democrats last week, and I'm trying to remember the person's name, a congresswoman who said, and she started crying on the conference call about, because she said, we've got to give up talking about.
Yeah, you're talking about, is it Sponberger?
Yes, exactly. Thank you. And she said, voters do not cotton to calls to defund the police or
yeah. I got the quote here. She says,
okay.
No one should say defund the police ever again.
There you
Nobody should be talking about socialism. She says, if they keep the party tactics up in 22 elections, we'll get the F torn apart. They censored it here on foxnews.com.
Now consider that she is castigating the Democrat Party from the other end that AOC is castigating it from. AOC says, we should sort of almost echoing libertarians' fealty to purity of principle. AOC is that we ought to be the progressives and proud of it and really pour our energy into supporting all those races where full-throated progressives are running. And then this other congressperson says, no, that's political poison. It's obvious that people don't like that.
Well, and it just depends. I mean, people in AOC's district might like it just fine, and people in Middle America aren't going to resonate with that so much. So it just depends. There's another thing here that AOC had said. She said, "I've been begging for the party to let me help them for 2 years."
Right, I remember hearing that.
All 5 of the venerable or swing district people that I helped secured victory or are on a path to secure victory, and every single one that rejected my help is losing. That's from Fox News. So, she might be right. I don't know if that's an accurate statement, but it probably is. But I think that it's the Democrat Party. I don't know if they can keep being a big tent like this. It's not that big of a tent.
Yeah, and the same darn thing, what we covered earlier in the show. There's going to be a real day of reckoning between Trumpism and other kinds of Republicanism. I mentioned during our first segment how I'd like to grab Senators Perdue and Loeffler from Georgia and shake them by the shirt collars for being such knuckleheads and demanding that the Attorney General resign for his handling. The other side of the coin is that keeps the Trumpist base fired up to make such firebrand comments. And with this runoff coming up, they need the vote of the Trump base, and Loeffler and Perdue probably think they're helping Trump. My point being that both of the major political parties are trying to fit these diametrically opposed elements within them into their big tents, and it's going to cause a each of them problems. Oh, go ahead.
I was just wondering if you saw a fragment coming. Do you think that they'll actually ever split? I think, we have a Green Party, but and there's also a Democratic Socialist Party. Do you think that anyone will ever actually break off and go to those parties, or
I don't know.
start a new one?
We may be seeing hints of an alignment so fundamental that it that births new coalitions that become parties to replace Republicans and Democrats, because the factions within the Republicans and Democrats that are opposed really can't abide each other very well. And now there's all outside organizations that are having a big cultural influence right now. There is Patrisse Cullors, who was one of the 3 women that founded Black Lives Matter in 2013, and is a self-avowed trained Marxist. She's now the leader of the Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation, and she penned a letter that was released November 7th, addressed to President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, basically saying that we expect to be at the table. We expect to help shape your administration's policies. And Black Lives Matter wields considerable influence, and they're fiercely determined. And I don't know. I mean, Kamala Harris is fairly sympathetic to them, and Joe Biden's kind of, and he's this faltering guy in his late 70s who probably would just kind of twiddle his thumbs while they ran roughshod over his own agenda, and he'd have to kind of, and he's already on record as pandering to the whole identity politics thing.
Oh yeah, well that's what he's good at. That's what he's good at. He's really good. He's really good at making black people think he's got their best interest in mind.
Right.
He's been doing that for half a century.
You're right. And so that's why, as a conservative, I'm not real keen on identifying myself as a Republican anymore. But that's why that Georgia runoff in January is so important. Without a Republican majority in the Senate, all this stuff will just come tumbling down.
Oh yeah.
Identity politics and climate alarmism and the federalization of education.
Yeah, that's why. That's why one reason why, like, as much as I abhor Trump and just think he's a really foul human being, and a man of very little character, I just, having Joe Biden at the helm of this nation, or Kamala Harris at the helm of this nation, it's just a recipe for disaster. I know that the corporate tax is going back up, the jobs are going to disappear again. I know that there will be draconian COVID lockdown measures that are going to continue to impact the economy and really, really, really impact people's real lives and cause a lot of pain, heartache, and suffering that's unnecessary. And I feel like we just don't have, with Trump, we sort of had an embarrassing crap show in the media, but we also had someone who was willing to go to bat for freedom on some issues, right?
Sure.
Not a lot. And I realize he's just as pro big government as a lot of Democrats, but and I don't support that. But on a few key issues, he was the only one defending freedom. And the truth is that now we don't have anyone defending anything.
Yeah. Apropos of his being a proponent of big government, in the 2016 campaign, when he was asked about, are you cool with the Affordable Care Act, or would you like to replace it with something, or just abolish it? All he had to say was, "We have to take care of everybody," which is not only maddeningly vague. It indicates a collectivist mindset. The government, top down, has to take care of everybody.
Yeah.
And his whole protectionist trade policy. Yeah, he's just such a mixed bag, because, like you say, and it's where when I get in tangles with Trumpists, they never fail to trot this out, and they're actually on pretty solid ground. Well, what about pulling out of the Paris Accord, and what about deregulation? And these are great moves. And what about originalist judges? These are great moves. I can't argue with that. But Donald Trump's just been a mixed bag. That it's kind of like trying to nail Jello to the wall.
Yeah. So
theology.
So Trump was that guy that, you know, if he was a baseball player, he'd be that guy that would get up to the plate, and 9 times out of 10 he'd hit himself with the bat, and and the 10th time he'd knock it out of the park.
Yeah,
you know, and Biden is never even going to be able to find the stadium. You know,
right. And there'll be lots of people like Patrice Cullors and Nancy Pelosi and AOC, and the stadium's this way, Mr. President.
Right, and there'll be draconian measures. You know, if you think about what Biden and Harris said during the debates and during the election cycle, that the president wasn't doing enough, that there should be federal lockdown orders, and there should be federal mask mandates and this kind of stuff. And it's like, you know, not even considering the idea that should be handled on a state by state or municipality by municipality level. Even though I have some problems with those, it's still like you know that there is no constitutional breach that they consider out of the question.
Yeah.
And the court packing thing really terrifies me. I like if they proceed to do this. I
once again, Clyde, that's why I know you're not a Republican, and I'm, like I say, I'm not really either. I am a conservative, but that's why I'm really biting my nails about what happens in Georgia in early January.
Yeah, yeah.
Because that's all that can stand between a chance for freedom and the principles we share, and on the other side, wholesale imposition of this vision and court packing and new states and all that kind of thing.
Yeah. Your choice just went out the window. Well, I guess it's probably a good place to wrap it up and call it a day. So,
we covered a lot of territory. It's just one thing I think that we can probably both agree on is that this election did nothing to lessen the polarization. We're about an equally divided country.
Boy, that's true. Yeah.
It's kind of, I've seen it likened to the trench warfare in the countryside in France in World War I. People would just fight to the death for months over 30 yards of terrain, and then they advance and get it, and then the other side would push back, and you just and that's kind of where we are politically in America.
Well, in Congress, I think that's good. If Congress is gridlocked, they can't pass any stupid frickin' laws.
Exactly, yeah.
And we're better off. But with the people...
Gridlock means nothing will get done in government.
Yay!
Exactly.
But if the people are divided like that, I think that's a bigger problem because, you know... I mean,
oh man, it makes for some real sad situations, like family members not talking to each other,
and it manifests in violence, and
you bet.
You know, more of the intolerance, you know, on both sides.
Yeah. Right.
Well, I think we have put our special touch on it and fixed the world's problems today.
Yeah. Reader or viewers and listeners, please chime in on the comment threads underneath our Facebook post, at our YouTube page, and send us emails. Be part of the conversation here.
Yes. Please do that. And the best way you can do that is to subscribe. So you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can subscribe to our audio podcast on Apple or on Spotify or on just about any podcast application or manager that you prefer. You can follow us on Facebook, and you can follow us on Twitter, and you can also follow us now on Parler at Barney and Clyde. I just personally opened up a MeWe account, so I'm going to make one for the show as well. I think Parler and MeWe are kind of a little bit underdeveloped, but just hedging bets, because a lot of people are getting removed unfairly from the bigger platforms, and there needs to be some place to go. And I'm not saying that these are good platforms, but they are alternatives that people are going to. So we'll have a presence there, and I hope you subscribe and chime in and comment and let us know what you think.
Yeah. We do this fortnightly and forthrightly, so that we'll be back at it again in a couple weeks. And until then, stay vigilant about your freedom.
Well, that's an interesting development.